The European Commission is expected to ask the Court of Justice to rule on the legality of Poland's controversial judicial law. The EU says the court reforms threaten the independence of the Polish judiciary, but Warsaw argues that the changes were legal. For more on this story, joining me now live from Brussels is Maeve McMahon. Maeve, what does this all mean for both Poland and the EU?
Well, in a nutshell, it means that the European Commission is just not satisfied with the correspondence that came from the Polish government on that reform, where they reduced the retirement age of judges from 70 to 65. And they will decide probably a little bit later today. It's yet to be 100% confirmed, but it's most likely that they will transfer this file and this dossier to the European Court of Justice, the EU court that was set up back in the 50s in order to solve legal disputes between member states and the EU institutions. What the European Court of Justice might be able to do then is introduce an interim measure that would stop this reform from being pushed through, to give the court a little bit of time to investigate it. Now, Frans Timmermans, that's the Vice President of the European Commission, is in charge of this dossier on behalf of the European Commission, and he's been saying for a couple of months that he does not want to start any sort of a war with the Polish government. He just wants them to come in line with EU law.
Now, Maeve, Poland is not just on the radar of the European Commission, but also of the European Parliament. Tell us more about that.
Indeed. Well, just last week, a couple of MEPs, so members of the European Parliament from the Civil Liberties Committee, actually travelled to Warsaw to spend 3 days getting to know various people there and politicians in order to understand these reforms that critics have called controversial, and organisations like the Council of Europe and the OECD have said go against EU law. And one man who was in charge of this mission on behalf of the European Parliament was Cloud Morris. He's a Socialist MEP from Britain, and he spoke to press in Warsaw last Friday and made it clear that he understood how sensitive this issue was, and that it was not an attempt of the European Parliament or the European Commission to interfere in Polish domestic affairs, but it was necessary. Let's take a listen to him.
Make it very clear that some of these reforms, including early retirement, are completely legitimate reforms by government to make. The issue for us is to assess, under the fundamental rights mechanism, whether individually or cumulatively these reforms in any way inhibit the ability of Poland as a nation and as a member of the European Union, implementing EU law as well as domestic law, whether it inhibits Poland's ability to function fully as an EU member state.
Cloud Morris will have to put to paper all his discoveries from that trip, but one thing that he was disappointed about is he didn't get to meet Jarosław Kaczyński, head, of course, of the Law and Justice Party.
Maeve McMahon live for us in Brussels. Thank you very much.